Wednesday, November 12th at 6 p.m. in the IRMC cafeteria. Register at irmc.org/2024 or call 724-357-7188. Information presented on this program is believed to be factual and up to date, but we do not guarantee its accuracy, and it should not be regarded as a complete analysis of the subjects discussed. Discussions and answers to questions do not involve the rendering of personalized investment advice, but are limited to the dissemination of general information. A professional advisor should be consulted before implementing any of the options presented. Encompass More Asset Management is registered as an investment advisor with the SEC and only transacts business in states where it is properly registered or is excluded or exempted from registration requirements. Registration with the SEC does not imply a certain level of skill or training. And there you go. We're off and rolling.
GCES.
Clinton Smith and Galen Burgerstock with us this morning. GCES, helping you to set up your retirement and to see it through to the very end. And gentlemen, good morning. How are both of you today?
Good morning. Doing well.
It's good to have you both with us here today. So we just went through the Halloween season, and Clint came in and he had this idea: Nightmares on Retirement Street. Bum,
Yeah.
Bum, bum,
Dun,
bum.
dun, dun.
All right.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty cool. That's a good way to go. So let's get into it here this morning. Nightmares on Retirement Street, and talk a little bit about some things that probably it's more common than we think.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, these are some situations that we've seen where people have just waited too long. You know, we talk about people procrastinating and waiting to plan their retirement. And these are kind of situations where people either waited too long or made really bad decisions on what they chose to do with their retirement. Mm-hmm. And we're here to help people, but we're not magicians. There's only so much stuff that we can do. So really, if you look at it, the first thing of deciding if you want to retire is an emotional checklist. You have to decide emotionally if you want to retire first. That's really making the first step to really get you going in that direction. So we really talk about that first. You have to be emotionally ready to actually start making the plunge and start learning what you need to do and figuring it out.
All right. Nightmare scenario number one.
I would say that, we had a guy one time, well, many people, this isn't just one guy, but you don't know if you're going to have an injury. An injury is just something that you can, fall upon. But literally. But, it's, I have a guy in particular that, was getting ready to retire, thinking about retirement. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden he did get injured, and then workman's comp came into play.
Okay.
So then it's the scenario, well, what do you do with workman's comp, and how does workman's comp work with retirement and get you into retirement? Mm-hmm. And what do you do? And all it's going to add is, an enormous amount of paperwork and steps that you need to do. And nobody really knows what's proper.
So he could ride, theoretically, he could ride his workman's comp right into retirement if it was done properly?
Correct. And, in some cases, they can't even force you to retire because it's a decision to retire, and it's not a decision to have an injury. So you technically could be on workman's comp for a long period of time and not have to retire at a certain age.
But one scenario could be an advantage to you, and one could be a disadvantage, depending upon how good your workman's comp system is.
Yeah. Ultimately, in this case, because we're going to change his name, we're calling him Johnny the City Carrier, not his real name. But in his case, he was on workers' comp for a long time, got kicked off of workers' comp. Instead of deciding to retire, he decided to try to fight workers' comp. At that point was without income for 6 months, hasn't been working for probably a year and a half because of the injury. Mm-hmm. And then he gets kicked off of workers' comp and then is forced into retiring because he didn't want to go back to the post office. They offered him a different position. He didn't want that position. It wouldn't have worked well with his injury. And then he ended up having to be forced into retirement, but that doesn't happen overnight when you work for the federal government. So he was still a month and a half behind of being able to actually retire and is already gone without income for 6 months. So he was in a really bad situation where workers' comp cut him off and he couldn't get into his retirement funds fast enough or retire fast enough to get all the paperwork done because there's still a process to do all of that. It's not overnight for anyone.
Yeah. Okay. So, and again, proper guidance is what is needed here for him.
It is. And then there's all kinds of fees associated because in most cases, people are getting lawyers on top of talking with financial advisors and then not getting paid their salary, customer service representatives at Workman's Comp seem to be nice and polite, but they're not the decision makers. So it takes a long time for a Workman's Comp claim to decide, well, is this going to result in a disability? And then in the federal government, if you have Workman's Comp and you're on Workman's Comp and you can go back to work, well, now they have to search for a job in a certain radius. So you could have to drive up to 50 miles to go do some kind of position just so you have something to do work-wise. So it gets very difficult. And, randomly, we've had this topic done for a while. And last week, I'm dealing with a new person in the same situation. So it is something to look out for.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so there's a proper way to approach that besides the fact that we have to get him a better name than Johnny the City Carrier.
Yeah.
Okay. Nightmare scenario number 2.
This is a much better name. This is Sally Shops a Lot. Mick Shops a Lot, sorry. She's a Mick. Sally Mick Shops a Lot. And that's pretty self-explanatory, I think.
So she retires and then she goes on a spending spree?
Basically, yeah. Spent pretty much 90% of her investments within the first year of retiring, not thinking of the long-term consequences of not having that income. So all of her investments spent down, and I believe she still had a pension, stuff like that.
Yeah, pension and Social Security. But then, you're always, I always say what I search for is your loss of income. So the loss of income is what you need monthly from your investments to make the difference. And, if you're spending all of your money because you want to get the house paid, you want a remodeled kitchen, you want a remodeled bathroom, all normal scenarios and feelings to have, but should you tackle that all within the first 6 months of retirement?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Yeah. Want a new car, too.
Add a new car into it. I mean, again, we say this a lot. I'm not here to tell you what to spend your money on. It's just, should you be doing it? And the more money you pull in from a tax-deferred account, the more taxes you're going to pay as well. So not only did she hurt herself by spending everything right at the very beginning, but she also paid more money to the IRS because it lifted her into a higher tax bracket.
Yeah. Okay. And all of these are scenarios that we think of, they require some discipline, they require some thought beforehand, but then they also require you to follow through on what your plan actually is.
Yeah.
We're not saying don't spend your money when you retire at all, because there are a lot of people that want to pay off their mortgage, they want to pay off their house. But whenever Galen sits down with someone, he's going to look at what you're actually spending on your home loan, what your interest rates are, compare that to what you're actually making in your investment accounts every year, and figure out the smartest way to do it without trying to lower your investment balance at the same time.
Yeah. Got to understand the consequences of whatever your decisions are, financial and otherwise. All right. Nightmare scenario number 3.
Nightmare scenario number 3. That's a good question.
You told me 3
Right, yeah.
beforehand, but
Hold
you
on.
forgot one?
Yeah, no, I know. It's the City Carrier, Sally Shops a Lot, and then
this one's
Tommy Tightwad. I remember now.
Tommy Tightwad.
Yeah.
He didn't spend any of his money.
Yeah, him and Sally Shops a Lot are not married.
No.
I don't think they would get along very well.
If they were, they're divorced now.
Yeah.
All right. So what's the problem with holding on to all your money like that, Galen?
Well, I mean, one, if you're holding on to all your money and you're paying cash for everything, you're not going to have any credit. So if you need something, you're not going to have credit because you've always paid cash. That's not even a big scenario if you have all this money stockpiled, though. It basically is you're doing all of this savings, you're saving all your life, you're preparing, but you don't want to touch it. You're afraid to touch it because you're afraid to run out. And I've known not just Tommy the Tightwad, I've known multiple people that have saved, didn't want to touch their retirement, and then they pass away. And then what is it all for?
Yeah. Tommy the Tightwad, the story that Galen tells, Tommy was so cheap that whenever Galen was at his house, he was fixing his leaking shower with duct tape. Which I'm not knocking on duct tape. It's a great DIY thing for home projects. It'll fix just about anything. But if you have $4 million in your bank account, you could afford to fix your shower head faucet from leaking.
These are all things I do.
Right?
So.
Well, whenever you're ready to retire, you just let us know. We'll help you out with all that money you got saved up.
Okay, so there you're talking about a scenario where somebody is needlessly limiting themselves, and that's really not what retirement is supposed to be about.
Yeah, you shouldn't have to go without because you're afraid you're going to outlive. And that's kind of where a conversation with a financial advisor helps make sense because, yeah, you can do it yourself, you can DIY all of this stuff, but if you're not spending because you think you don't have to, there might be another opinion out there. I call it live on, leave on. you can live off of your money and still leave on like you want to. It's just it hurts a little when I see all of this money saved and then it goes nowhere but the savings of it. They just like the idea of getting a good return.
Yeah. Well, I mean, his pension was maxed out. He could have not made any more. He could have worked and continued working, but he was never going to make any more. His pension was maxed out. He was already at 42 years, I think is what it is. So he wasn't getting any more money to work there annually in his retirement. When he passed away, his pension doesn't go to anyone. He didn't have a spouse or anything. So all of that money that he would have gotten from the pension just went back to the pension company. He never got any of that. His investments would have went to next of kin. His Social Security would have passed on to no one and would have went back into Social Security. So he was living without and really could have probably taken more advantage of that money. I mean, we never know what's going to happen. Death could be here tomorrow. It's election day. It might be. So it's very, it's hard to tell what's actually happening, but to limit yourself that much while you're living really is not going to be that great if something happens to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So when you're setting up a retirement for any of these folks, what you're trying to get to is the exact right balance that is going to allow them to live the life that they really dreamed that they could live once their retirement years came. And if at the end of that monthly income that you have coming in that you've set up, there's some left over, well, then you have the option of doing something with that money and not being like Sally and spending it all.
Yeah.
Not being like Tommy and saving it all, but doing something useful with it. And even something fun.
Somewhere right in the middle would work perfect between the both of them. That's two very extreme cases of retirement mess ups.
In the end, you're going to put them in the best position, Galen, that they can live the life that they want to live. Whether they choose to go ahead and live that is their choice. But you're just in the position of positioning them.
Yeah.
I think that I'm in the position to be a listening ear that's licensed to talk back to you and tell you what I think on a professional standpoint, not a friend. I mean, I have to hear what your scenario is to know what is appropriate for me to tell back to you. I've told many people to start spending their money. I'm definitely not shy. I don't really tell people to rein it in. That's not my. I don't think it's my place to tell you to stop spending money, but RMDs, we have to have that conversation. You're going to have to take out money at a certain age anyways, so I'll have some uncomfortable conversations with people.
Ultimately, when we set up people's retirement, they're going to be with us for years and years. Do you know what I mean? We're there for people when they retire. We're there for them whenever they pass away. So in that time, we welcome those conversations because life happens, things change, and you might be like, hey, this happened. I think I should pay off my house. What do you think, Galen? And then he'll help them figure out the best way to do it and where to pull the funds from that'll have the least effect on their retirement.
I think we just came up with the new slogan for GCES. Life happens, things change.
Yep. Yeah.
Right. So folks want to know what to do about this retirement conversation. What should they do?
Give us a call, 724-915-0000. You can visit us online at gces.us. Or you can just stop in our office at 1780 Philadelphia Street.
Very good.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Todd.
Thank you.
It is the voice of Indiana County. It's WCCS 101.1 FM, AM 1160.